Okay, so The Last of Us Episode 1 is now out, and I'm so excited to talk about it. The first game is my favourite of all time, and I've bought the PS3 version, the PS4 remaster, and even the PS5 remake that released a couple of months ago. This is a game I've completed numerous times on Grounded mode, and the series is something I've been desperate to do a deep dive on. Throughout this video, we're going to be breaking down the first episode scene by scene, and talking about all the Easter eggs, hidden details, and what they did differently to the game. If you haven't played it, then don't worry, because we won't be spoiling what happens down the line, as I want you to enjoy the twists and turns as much as I did on my first playthrough. However, I may need to touch upon certain things due to characters that get name dropped here, but I'll only bring them up in our super spoiler section at the end of the video, which I'll give you a heads up on.
I'm nice like that.
Now, unlike the game, the series starts off in 1968. Originally, we watched as Sarah woke up in her bed and ventured about the house, but here they do it differently. Rather than throwing us in at the night of the outbreak, we get some backstory that wasn't even filled in the source material. The game told us very little about the virus beyond it being caused by cordyceps, which had mutated to infect humans. These real-life fungi exist in the jungle, and the parasite infects insects and also arthropods. Beginning in 1968 though, we see a TV show in which two scientists do a big theory time about what the biggest threat to humanity is. The first one goes off about how we may have a pandemic level event that's caused by a strain of influenza, which, awkward. Now, both games were made before the pandemic, and the creative team have retroactively added this into the show to comment on it, in my opinion. The scientist mentions how airplanes are a new element that will help viruses like this spread easier, and later on we see several planes flying overhead as Sarah, Joel and Tommy make their escape. They add a lot of focus to them during the truck scene, and actually change up how the crash happens. Originally, it was caused by another one hitting them, but they do a fake out in the episode and instead have plane debris causing it. Now, the scientist played by John Hannah talks about the threat of cordyceps and how climate change could allow the fungi to spread from the more tropical regions of the world to human population centers. He talks about how cordyceps work, and this is something that scientists have studied in the wild. The fungi infect their host, and they then fill them with hallucinations that cause them to act a certain way. A lot of the time they'll get ants to climb high up into the trees, and then from here they'll kill the host and get them to spread their spores. One thing I thought that was so creepy about the game is that we'd often stumble across the infected whilst they were unaware we were in the area. You'd often catch them sobbing away in corners, and the creative team said it was horrendous being one of them due to the parasite basically infecting your brain. Similar to how the spore ants were set up, the infected would lay down somewhere and die, and they'd become points of infection that could fire spores out into the air. We see one of these later on in the episode, but they do stay their hand and don't reveal the later stages of the infected in this first entry. The character also says this very important line.
There's no cures, they don't exist, it's not even possible to make them.
That's why Ellie becomes so important later on, because she seems like the last hope to dig humanity out of this hellhole. They end this speech by clearly setting up the stakes and showing why the world ends up the way it does.
We lose.
That's another thing I love about the game, and whereas we normally watch the outbreak and go from there, we get a massive time jump to see humanity far, far, far in the future. Now after this we cut to the title sequence, which is presented in a similar way to the black and white one that started off the game. There's lots of symbolism here with a fungus rising up to create a skyline, showing how it's become the dominant force in the world. We also see one creating a face, before finally settling on the silhouettes of Joel and Ellie. The theme tune used here is pulled directly from the game, and it instantly sets the tone of this solitary and bleak storyline. Now if you're enjoying the video so far, it's about to get a lot better, I promise, but please hit the thumbs up button to help us out. Also, make sure you subscribe, as we'll be covering the show weekly, and you definitely don't want to miss any of our breakdowns. By the way, a huge thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into The Last of Us. Okay, so originally the game took place in 2013, which just so happened to be the year of its release. We then got the 20-year time jump like what we have in the show, which took us to the year 2033. The game was littered with calendars marking the date, and in the second one, you could even find a PlayStation 3 with a copy of Uncharted 2 beside it. However, the series changes things up in order to have the main parts take place in 2023. We start off in 2003, and much like how the game opens, we see things from Sarah's perspective. Now originally, that had the player waking up on the night of the outbreak, which also happened to be Joel's birthday. Here though, we get a full day in the life of Sarah, and the entire time I was wishing I could sit and watch this with someone who had no idea about the games and be like, does he know? Now Sarah is very much a reflection of Ellie, They've even given her a backpack which wasn't in the game to make her more closely mirrored to her. She also wears a Halcyon Drops t-shirt which Sarah too wore in the game. That had the 2012 tour, whereas this is the 02 one, so that it doesn't mess too much with the timeline. Neat little Easter egg on it is that all the locations that Halcyon Drops toured at are in the order of places that the characters visit in the game. Now we pick up the scene by starting at Sarah's window, and this is important iconography, as an open window is also something that's used on the game's menu screen. It also ties into something that we'll talk about in the super spoiler section, and this window shot could become something defining down the line. Now in Sarah's room we see a band poster for The Clash and also Destiny's Child. This is similar to her room in the game, in which she had a Halcyon's Drop poster and also one for the in-universe movie called Dawn of the Wolf. The Destiny's Child poster says Survivor, and it's not this child's destiny to be a survivor. Hey, having that too soon. Now interestingly, the calendar says August, but we do get it confirmed later on that the outbreak happened on September 26, because that's also Joel's birthday. She's just forgot to change it, and I kind of think this was left like this to show she's just a carefree kid, or someone on the set, they're getting fired. Now they also picked to set it around summer because the heat would help the spread of the cordyceps, and it adds to the idea of the seasonal storyline that The Last of Us has. Joel says he's 36, making him 56 when we join him later, and over his left shoulder we can see a football on the rack. We'll not say soccer ball, you chumps, and this is actually an important bit of iconography. In the game, there's a photo of Joel and Sarah celebrating her winning a trophy, and the character goes back and forth over whether to acknowledge this or not. We get a brief glimpse at her on the team when we cut to the news report on the radio. We can see a photo of them all together to the right of it. Later on, when we see Sarah moving about the house, we also get a good look at the football again, alongside an acoustic guitar on the other side of the room. Joel's a keen guitar player, and we learn in the game that he even wanted to become a singer at some point in his early life. However, he and his wife had Sarah when they were very young, and she ended up leaving him, which is when he took on the responsibility of raising her. Now at this point walks in Tommy, played by Gabriel Luna. He sounds exactly like Tommy does in the game, and I actually closed my eyes and couldn't tell the difference.
Definitely the same. I thought we was having pancakes.
They got no clue. But we ain't the only town.
We know Joel and Tommy worked as carpenters, and unfortunately, due to a job, he has to work a double shift to get stuff finished for the day. At this point, a news report goes out over the radio, and we hear a mention of Jakarta. We don't know where the outbreak originated from due to the game not really telling us, but it is possible that this is the show filling in the backstory of how it came about. It's of course a very hot country, and this would tie back to the climate comments made by the scientist earlier on. Joel's t-shirt's inside out, and I like how they have him donning the grey one that he had at the start of the game. This is reflected in Tommy too, who's wearing a salmon shirt like how he does in the intro. Now Sarah then goes to Joel's room and takes his watch out the drawer so that she can get it fixed. In the game she just bought him, but here she's using his money to get it fixed up because she's a cheapskate. She's a bloody cheapskate. Now Joel's watch is extremely important as it breaks on the night the infected rise up, but he keeps it with him as a memento. Though he shuts himself off from talking about Sarah, there are points where he can be seen longingly staring at it as a reminder of what he's left behind. She also finds a knife in his drawer, hinting at him potentially having a darker past, and outside we see that the truck has Combat Veteran on it. Now from this it's possible that he might have been part of Operation Desert Storm, however, this could actually belong to Tommy as well, as he's the one driving it. Captain Obvious here, but bit of I think Tommy snuck it in quickly. Now Tommy did end up joining the Fireflies when it all went down, and his experience in the army could have been the reason why he got so high up in the ranks. Joel says to Marlene later that she turned his own brother against him, and we might see more of the group from Tommy's perspective. Anyway, that's in a few time. It's not in the game, so it's not a spoiler, so you better not be fucking complaining. Now we also meet the neighbours at this point, and in the game, this is where the first infected attacked from. However, it wasn't an old lady, and instead, it was a man that attacked them called Jimmy Cooper.
What's going on?
It's the Coopers. Something right with them. I think they're sick.
What kind of sick?
Jimmy!
Dad?
At school, we see a picture of George W. Bush, who would have been president at this time due to him being in the job from 2001 to 2009. Here we can see that the infection has started to hit humanity, as we can catch a student twitching away, which we later see at the federal camp is one of the signs of infection. The cordyceps attach to someone's brain and affect their nervous system, which is why these little mannerisms start before it takes control. Love the little detail as Sarah steps off the bus and we can catch an advert for a Nokia 3310, which I think I probably had back in 2003. Snake 2, reigning champion, you, don't at me. Anyway, Sarah gets the watch fixed and we start to see that something might be off due to the amount of sirens and the fact the shop owners close up. They're likely making a run for it like we see people doing later on, and hey, I appreciate the blind thing was a little clock face. Sarah visits her neighbours, the Adlers, and she asks to borrow the DVDs Curtis and Viper 2. This is a film that later popped up in The Last of Us Part 2 during a conversation. Has some big spoilers that kind of riff on this that I'll save for the super spoiler section, and I'll also go through what was said in regards to the plot of the movie. Now Sarah later gives this to Joel, and the reviews say it's one of the best performances I've ever seen. Little bit of a funny story here that always makes me chuckle, but Jonathan and Paul Ross both used to be massive movie critics and they had a bet with each other about who could get on the back of the box for Batman Forever. They both wrote really stupid reviews, and that's why the back of the VHS tape for it has the quote from Jonathan Ross saying, "One of the greatest movies ever made. Batman Forever, one of the greatest movies ever made." Anyway, something is clearly off with the neighbours and the dog is acting strange too. Dogs were used by the bandits to show whether someone had cordyceps or not, as they of course didn't have the fancy tech that the Fedra agents do. Now at this point we get Joel and Sarah having a conversation on the sofa, which is pulled directly from the game.
Honey, it's nice, but I think it's stuck. It's not.
What? No. Oh, ha ha.
Did you?
What?
I don't hear anything.
Where did you get the money for this?
Where'd you get the money for this?
Drugs. I sell hardcore drugs.
Drugs. I sell hardcore drugs.
It's better when I do.
Love how they do some of the stuff verbatim, and the father and daughter moment is the last real conversation they have. Cut to Sarah asleep, and this plays out similar to how it does in the game, only this time they make the pair a bit closer by having her do it on his lap. In the game, I don't think we found out why Joel left, but we did see texts on his phone asking where the hell he was. Here we see the phone call was learning that one of the infected started attacking people at the bar, and Tommy got locked up for fighting them. Joel has to bail him out and he puts Sarah to bed, which is when we see her waking up, which is how the game properly starts. In it you take control of her and walk through the house as you see news reports that are documenting some of the attacks. They have an explosion happen which then appears on the news as well, whereas here she's woken up by the sounds of passing choppers and dogs. The little Pooch Murphy jumps up at the patio, which I think is playing on the dog we hear barking that we then hear yelping as Sarah gets to the door. Sarah visits the Adlers and here she finds that the elderly woman is now up about and eating people. I got a lot of flashes here to the first zombie that you come across in Resident Evil, with the hair loss making this appear really similar. They've actually added something to the infected here, and we can see that the cordyceps comes out of her mouth, which wasn't present in the game. In nature, they try and get as high as possible so they can spread the spores easier, and I love this addition to the infected that makes them more horrifying. Joel and Tommy arrive, with Joel swinging a wrench, similar to how you use melee weapons in the game. They jump in the truck, and I love how we can see the Adlers in the street now showing how quick the infection spreads. Now, the truck ride is really similar to it, with it being word for word at points. We also have them approaching signs for Austin one way and the hospital which is the other, and this is all ripped right out of the source material. They head towards the hospital, and this is of course where most of the outbreak would be at its worst due to people being taken there after they got sick. We learn that the Adlers actually went there to get medicine for the elderly one, and this is likely how she picked up the infection in the first place. Anyway, enough of me talking, let's play the scenes side by side so you can see how close they are.
Some sort of parasite or something.
Virus, some kind of parasite.
Are we sick?
No, of course not.
Are we sick?
No, of course not.
No cell phone, no radio. Yeah, we're doing great. A minute ago, newsman wouldn't shut up.
No cell phone, no radio. A minute ago, newsman wouldn't shut up.
How do you know?
The hell. That's Lewis's farm. I hope that son of a bitch made it out.
God. It's Jimmy's place.
We're good.
Didn't Jimmy work in the city?
What are you doing?
Got a kid, Joe.
So do we. Keep driving.
What do you think you're doing? Keep driving.
I got a kid, Joel.
So do
But
we.
we have room.
Somebody else will come along.
Someone else will come along.
Fuck! Everybody had the same fucking idea.
Everyone and their mother had the same damn idea.
Back!
No. Come on, people, move.
What are they running from?
Get us out of here.
I'm trying.
Oh no.
Now after the truck's thrown off the road, Sarah's unable to walk and Joel has to carry her. This is where we take control of him in the game, and it leads to them running through a restaurant chased by the infected like what we see here. Now at this point we get what's probably the most devastating part in the whole story. Normally in post-apocalyptic tales, when characters run into soldiers, it's often a sign of safety. They're used as a way to show that people have someone looking after them, but here it's the complete opposite. Ordered to shoot Joel and Sarah, he fires upon them, and this ends up killing Sarah. I've watched this scene a ton of times in the game, and it was only upon this watch through that I realised that they did this because Sarah was injured and they might have suspected a bite. Anyway, it completely rips your heart out, and as always, I'm going to show you how it works alongside the game.
Oh no.
Sarah. Move your hands, babe.
No.
Okay. I know, baby, I know. God. Listen to me. I know this hurts, baby. You're gonna be okay, baby. Stay with me.
No. I know, baby. I know it hurts.
I'm gonna pick you up. I know, baby. I know it hurts.
I know this hurts. Baby, listen to me. I gotta get you up.
Come on, baby, please. I know, baby. I know. Sarah.
Joel. Come on, baby girl. I gotta get you up.
Baby. Don't do this to me, baby. Don't do this to me, baby.
Come on, get up. Come on, baby girl. Come on.
Completely gut-wrenching, and it's the defining moment in Joel's life that changes him for the worse. This scene is the key to understanding the character, and it sets up basically everything that's to come. Now from here we get a time jump of 20 years, and a big section that wasn't in the game. Here we watch a child out in the wilderness making their way to the federal camp, which is located in Boston. The red shirt reminded me a lot of the girl in Schindler's List that we see moving through the devastation, and later on her body's cast aside, similar to what we see Joel doing. His role is also very similar to some characters in The Stand, with there being body disposal crews that had to get rid of the dead after the world had destabilized. This child's found to be infected, and the Fedra soldiers end up euthanizing them. Fedra is basically the remnants of the federal government, but they were seen as fascists in the Last of Us universe. They had strict rules that sentence people to death for very, very little, and in the game we're first introduced to them forcing people to their knees and shooting the infected. Now because of their strict rule, many resistance groups rose up, including the Fireflies. Several rebels rose up and they propped up their own leaders, which, if they were better or not, is another question entirely. Now I think here they're painted out in a better light, and though they kill the kid, they do it mercifully and even lie to make it seem like they're gonna be taking care of them. Now what's very bleak about The Last of Us is that there's barely any kids in the entire thing. Most of the people we follow are middle-aged, and as they say, children are our future. The fact there's so few kids shows how doomed humanity is, and Ellie represents not only the hope in the cure, but also in the fact that children can make it in this world, even though the two we meet early on here are killed. But moving on, and we also see a poster that breaks down the full time to infection, and we can see that Ellie's bite would be roughly 2 to 8 hours, with one being on the foot giving someone a day. Ones in the neck and face gives someone 5 to 15 minutes, which explains why the Adlers got up so quickly in the truck scene. The kid's killed after the scanner flashes red on them, and this very much foreshadows the fate that would have come to Ellie had Joel not saved her life. It's heartbreaking because we don't really know what the red symbol means, and part of me was hoping that the kid made it out after the guard said you're safe. Sadly though, we see her body in the back of a truck, and this is how we're reintroduced to Joel and where he is now. Carries the body almost like how he did with Sarah, and dumps them on the fire, showing no attachment at all. At this point, we see ration cards being handed out. These also appeared in the game, and they look identical to how they did in that. We then cut to shots of the city, and also get a curfew sign. This pops up in the game as well, and it's identical to the one you see when you first walk around Boston. We see some of the citizens, and catch a guy in an Al Gore Lieberman campaign shirt from the 2000s election campaign. Don't know why he's wearing this, but they could possibly be reminiscing about a world in which Gore was in charge because of all of his climate change stuff, or they might be the only clothes they've been able to get a hold of in the last 20 years. Firefly symbols are covered up because they could cause dissent, and we see how people are hanged for leaving the QZ. This is something that Joel does regularly, and he works as a smuggler. We catch a Fedra soldier twitching, but it's not because he's infected, and Joel in fact ends up selling him pills. In the game, this is something that Tess is coming back from when we first meet her.
So I'll take one guess. The whole deal went south and the client made off with our pills. Is that about right?
The guard shows up later on when he catches them outside, and I love this addition to the series for when he pops back up. We pretty much don't spend any time with the guards beyond chucking them out in the game, and it shows how they're all working in shades of grey with them wanting people to exit the QZ whilst also killing those that do. He then brings up the Firefly attacks, and these end up freeing Tess from her captives. We see a big bit of graffiti for the Fireflies on the wall, and this is similar to the radio messages that Marlene was putting out in the game.
Remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light.
Now from here we jump to Tess in a moment that we weren't really privy to in the game. In that we start with Joel waking up, and she shows up to the apartment beaten up after 2 people were sent after her by Robert. Now it turned out that Joel and Tess had sold him some guns that the Fireflies also got. Here though, it all centers around a truck battery. I actually prefer it with a battery being something they can use to get a car to get out of there, and it kinda ties back to the backstory with Tommy. Now they do change things up from the game, and the first part in the future follows Joel and Tess as they hunt Robert down. Eventually they catch and kill him, which is when Marlene arrives, and it's this that leads into the Ellie mission. Interestingly, Marlene's played by Mil Dandridge, who just so also happened to play her in the game. Now here we pick up with Tess tied up, and Robert begging her to let things go. It shows how much of a G she is, and in the game she killed the captors herself. The Firefly explosion allows her to escape, and this is riffing on the scene in the game when they go to cross a checkpoint and one blows off, which makes Tess and Joel flee through the tunnels. Now from here we jump to Ellie chained up. She's currently being observed due to being bit, and we see her standing in front of a window again, calling back to that iconography. Naughty Dog have added in their own Uncharted Easter egg, and Ellie's wearing the same shirt that young Nathan Drake had on in Uncharted 3. Joel goes to a radio operator, and we learn that he's been trying to reach out to Tommy, which is what the truck battery's for. He returns to the apartment and falls asleep on the bed, hearing echoes of his brother screaming. Joel, Tommy, and Tess had to do horrendous things in order to survive, and we might even get the backstory filled in beyond what we got in the game. Cut to Joel waking up, which is where we pick up after the time jump, and we see Tess telling him about Robert in a scene that echoes how we first meet her. They mount up and decide to head out, which is when we cut to Marlene. Leader of the Fireflies, we then see them planning attacks with a map on the table. Her forces are starting to ask questions about why people are dying, and why there's a random girl locked up just down the hall. Marlene is wearing clothes similar to the game, and they're planning to move every Firefly out of the city because of Ellie's immunity. We even see one trying to recruit Joel, and I love how the Fireflies are slotted in almost every aspect of the city. Also worth pointing out that Tess is wearing the exact same clothes that she has on in the game, except for the bandana, which, I like that bandana. Now, when Joel stands against the wall, we can also see several posters, including one in the bottom left for Curtis Viper 2. At this point, Marlene goes to Ellie, and she throws her bag over. This is exactly the same as the game, and it even has the little Cyclops head like what the character has in that. We also see her pull out a flick knife, which is something that she uses throughout the original work. Marlene gives her the keys to her handcuffs, and she brings up the Fedra Military School. Future spoilers that we'll not spoil now, but we will talk about them later on in the video, and how this ties into parts of the story coming up. Now it's sort of touched upon here, but Marlene had Ellie drafted into a Fedra program as a child, and this was to keep her safe. She knew her mother and wanted her away from the Fireflies, and also brings up Riley, which, we'll save that for later on. Anyway, she warns Ellie that she'll be killed if people know about her, and this comes to be true. Joel and Tess make their way through some buildings, and they move underground, which is a similar thing to what they did in the game. Now they come across an infected person who's grown into the wall, and I absolutely love the look of this, as it hints towards the more mutated ones that appear later on. Everything is spot on here, including the green wall, which looks like it's ripped right out of the PlayStation Classic. When moving through the tunnels, you encounter someone stuck to a wall, and I was kinda hoping they'd pull out the gas masks for this bit, but unfortunately they don't. Now those stuck into the wall would attach and then fire spores in the environment, but sadly they cut that out here. Anyway, it leads them to the Firefly base, which is where they find Robert dead. In the game it was Tess who shot him, but either way, he gets capped in the same place. At this point they come across a wounded Marlene, similar to the source material, and Ellie attempts to attack Joel, which is how she's first introduced in the original work. Joel and Tess are tasked with transporting Ellie to a bunch of fireflies, and in exchange, they'll be given a whole truck. They agree, and we get a scene in which they rest up in a room whilst the rain pours down. This is similar to how it played out in the original, with them all laying low here for the first time, and Joel getting some shut-eye. Ellie finds a note detailing code words, and throughout the game, you'd often come across notes with crude scribblings in them, detailing things like safe codes, backstories, and information about the groups you'd encounter. This is inside a Billboard book, and it details how songs from each decade detail whether there's a new stock in. Now, the 80s have a big X next to them, and we learn that this means danger. This is very important, as come the end of the episode, we hear a song detailing the danger that they're heading into. We can see that the page is open on the 1970s, and at the top you can catch The Long and Winding Road / For You Blue. Released by the Beatles, this single had For You Blue as the B-side to it, and The Long and Winding Road could be a little nod to the big journey ahead of them, big reach. But yeah, it's been left behind by Bill and Frank, who we'll talk about more in the spoiler section I've been teasing. Now Joel falls asleep, and we get some repeated lines from the game.
You mumble in your sleep.
You mumble in your sleep.
Now that night they sneak through the streets, and I remember playing this and it being so intense as the trucks move past and spotlights rain down outside the wall. You sneak underground and then pop up like what we see here, and have to avoid searchlights as they pierce the surroundings. Love the juxtaposition of a big sign that says welcome, which is of course something that the shadows of the Federal soldiers completely go against. We then get this line from Ellie.
Holy shit. I'm actually outside.
Holy shit, I'm actually outside.
And they also sneak through a pipe, which is a lot like the sewer ones that you ended up crawling through. At this point they come across the soldier, whereas in the original they were caught by two. In the game Ellie attacked them upon being scanned, and Joel and Tess jumped and shot them respectively. Here though he gets a PTSD flashback of Sarah's death, which triggers him into attacking. I actually think this works better, especially with a soldier returning, and it shows that Joel's even willing to attack people they know if it rubs him the wrong way. They discover Ellie's bite and she says,
Look! This is 3 weeks old. Nobody lasts more than a day.
It's 3 weeks old.
No, everyone turns within 2 days, so you stop bullshitting.
It's 3 weeks.
Now the alarm rings and the group head through the fence, which is when we cut to the radio to hear the song Never Let Me Down Again by Depeche Mode. It contains lyrics like I'm taking a ride with my best friend, sort of playing into the show. Now this signals the incoming danger as we watch the group head to the twin skyscrapers from the game. Over the top of this we hear the cry of an infected, and we end the episode with a lingering shot on them. Now we've hit that long awaited super spoiler section, and from this point on we'll be covering things from both games, so if you haven't played them then thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you next week. You better be back, mate. You promised you would. Anyway, yeah, spoilers. Just wait for everyone to leave. Right, okay, they're gone. Now the first point is Joel's guitar that we see in the beginning of the episode. This is how the second game opens, with him strumming away on it. It's also how the second game ends, with Ellie playing on it too, but she's unable to properly do it due to her losing her fingers. We also get a lingering shot of the window to close the game out, which is very reminiscent of how the scene with Sarah opens, which of course ties in with the menu. Now in the episode, there's of course the mention of Riley as well. Didn't want to spoil it for those that didn't know, but you're here now, so you either play the game or you don't care. And this was the girl that was with Ellie on the night that she got bit. This is all chronicled in the Left Behind DLC, which is basically a night in which Riley takes Ellie to the mall before she's shipped off with the Fireflies. The pair end up kissing, and Riley agrees to stay, but the peace is interrupted by the infected, who end up swarming the area. Riley dies, and Ellie of course survives, which she carries a lot of guilt over. Now early on in the episode, the scientist talks about how the fungus devours its host from the inside, and when we look at the clickers, we can see the entire top part of their head has been replaced by the fungi. The scientist also explains how due to the fungi being something we use for penicillin, that it can maintain a host for a prolonged period of time. In the game we of course meet the infected decades down the line, and we can see just how far they mutated. Now, there's also the mention of a radio tower in the episode, which is where I'm guessing they'll head to after they meet Henry and Sam. This was the location they camped out at, and it's probably going to be somewhere that appears later on in the series along with all the Riley stuff. Not really an Easter egg, but Sarah's played by Nico Parker, who's also the daughter of Thandwi Newton. Also, the showrunners have said there's going to be no spores or gas masks in the series. Neil Druckmann said it's because if there were spores in this world, they would spread everywhere and everyone would have to wear masks all the time. That kind of sucks, as I love the aesthetic they brought in the game, and I think people could have suspended their disbelief or probably not have even had that cross their mind, because we're living in a world of zombie fungi. To me, it would have given the infected encounters a sort of upside down from Stranger Things feel, but alas, 'tis no more. Now as for Curtis and Viper 2, this is the movie that Joel and Sarah were going to watch together the night that she died. He never got to see it, and in a bitter twist of irony, it's also the movie that Joel and Ellie were going to watch the night that he died too. Joel and Ellie had had a falling out due to her discovering the truth, but she had decided to see if she could forgive him by inviting him over to watch a movie. That night they were going to watch it, and here's what Ellie had to say.
What movie are you guys gonna watch? What's Joel into?
Curtis and Viper 2. That's the one that's been on my radar for a while.
Oh, wow.
Well, we used to watch these cheesy 80s action movies. He's really into them.
Oh, no.
I actually really like them, too.
What's Curtis and Viper 2 about?
Okay, so 2 former commandos that go rogue to fight bad guys. And I think in this one, they go up against Russian spies or something.
I'm more interested in this than I thought I would be.
All right, so the young one, Viper, he's a trained ninja. And he's a complete badass.
So how old is he in the first movie?
10.
Wait, how many movies did they make of this?
I think they made 4?
Jeez.
Joel actually saw the last one in the theater. Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
Lastly is Bill and Frank, the former of which we know will be played by Nick Offerman. He's someone Joel and Tess have had a long-standing relationship with, and upon reaching him, Joel and Ellie are escorted to a school in order to get a car battery. They don't get it, but they do find Frank, who we discover was bit, and he unalived himself, which I have to say, because YouTube's been ridiculously strict with the demonetization recently. The pair were lovers, but they grew apart, and Frank fled in order to get away from him. Anyway, I think that's all the spoiler Easter eggs too, and I really hope that you enjoyed the breakdown. I had a blast putting this together, and I'm so glad that HBO have done justice to the game. I was worried they might mess it up, and though it's very, very early days, I think this first episode was great. Really captures the feel of the source material, and as a fan, I couldn't have asked for more. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts and whether you agree or not, but for me, yeah, this was a great way to start the series. Now, if you want something else to watch and you don't mind Last of Us spoilers, then definitely check out our breakdown of why the game's got the perfect ending. It talks about all the themes in it, some things you might have missed, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, then you're gonna love that too. Hopefully see you over there, and yeah, make sure you stick with us as we're gonna be doing Last of Us every single week. We're gonna be milking it dry, and yeah, I hope you come along for the ride. By the way, thanks for clicking this. I've been Paul, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.